Okay, part 3 as we continue here. And so I want to go back for a second and visit. You get back to the United States, and after 3 girls, a baby boy is born.
Right.
And so and those days, obviously, you didn't know what you were going to have, right?
Mm.
Do you remember finding out it's a boy?
Well, we had a girl named Reddy. It was pretty hard. We were using organ stops for second names, like Danny, Celeste, and all those. We had Caroline picked out for our girl.
Yeah, that was Mom's middle name.
It was used, that's right.
Yeah.
So we had organ stops for second names, and then we got down to what would we do if it was a boy? Well, we decided the 2 grandfathers, Paul and Barrett. Strangely enough, Barrett Cotner didn't have a middle name. And so we didn't have a middle one to use, but we surely had a first one. And my middle name is Barrett, too. So we used Paul Barrett for the son. And he's a graduate of a dental school, too, and already retired.
So 4 kids that all go into dentistry, some whose spouses are dental related as well. Uncle Doug, he's a dentist. So.
Right, and a granddaughter who's a dental hygienist.
Amazing. After you went to Guatemala, list off some of the other mission trips that you did.
Well, it would be difficult to name them all, but I can name 7 that Rotary International co-sponsored with. Of course, there's no payment for these trips. It's all gratis. But Rotary had clinics established at several locations around the world. I remember one of the trips was to eastern Guatemala, Semanji, Semanji, and then they gave me a trip down to Livingston, down the Rio Dulce River that drains Lake Isbo, the major lake of Guatemala, except for Lake Atitlan, which is very important too down near Guatemala City. But anyway, that was a major dental clinic, and in these locations, we would have a place where they had a dental clinic, and we would spend 1 or 2 days a week, usually a Sunday and a Monday, at these established clinics. Then the rest of the week, we'd travel around the country, sometimes coming back at night and sometimes being too far away. Mm-hmm. And we would work in schools. We would work in vacant buildings. We would work in Social Security centers. We would work in specialty areas, such as sometimes an Islamic center in a Hindu area in India, like that. There was all sorts of unusual arrangements where they were getting along fine. There was no riots or no disagreement at all. The partition of India had taken place in 1947, and so we worked in Western Pakistan, or mainly Pakistan, because now we call Eastern Pakistan Bangladesh. And it was a difficult thing when they divided India, because Western Pakistan had all the manufacturing and the limestone, and Eastern Pakistan had all the aquaculture. And of course, it was over near Calcutta. And so an interesting thing with the big tsunami from Indonesia that took place just a few years ago, I asked one of the priests who regularly goes to Benghazi, one of the interesting priests who regularly goes to Calcutta and the area over there of Eastern Pakistan, about how did the tsunami act in the Bay of Bengal, because when we lived in India, we lived at a former name was Madras, but now called Chennai, and we were just a block and a half from the Bay of Bengal at water level, and I'm sure the building where we lived was completely wiped out. It almost had to be. This was close to the location where the Apostle Paul was martyred, by the way, when he came back from what is now Pakistan down to Mumbai, at that time Bombay, and across the continent, a subcontinent of Asia, which, by the way, is traveling north at the rate of 1 inch per year and traveling upward at the rate of 1 inch per year. But anyway, the Apostle Paul met his death over near Chennai, just south of Chennai, in a cave. Well, to get back to the story, the sacred animals of cows, of course, in the right of way is always a difficult thing, especially if you're traveling at night. When I was at Pakistan, I lived in a Christian enclave. It was had been started Presbyterian, but had been contributed to by many, and including some good German causes that contribute to health care in Pakistan. And one of the ophthalmologists, there are 5 there, because the indigenous people are affected by dust in the air, and the eye problems are really tremendous. But so his wife had gone back to her home in Quetta, which is down near, in the troublesome part of Pakistan, that's down near the major city. And he wanted to take me to a decent place to eat. And so we got on the Grand Trunk Highway. Now this was a major blacktop road that traversed India before the partition. And since the partition, is still in existence, but there are not many border crossings because they don't permit many. They handicap you there. And we went to a truck stop. And in this truck stop, the owner sat up high like a Maharaja on his throne and took in the cash when the truck drivers would buy their meals. And so I thought, now this is a fine place to have some souvenir pictures made. So I'm going to see if I can get some pictures made with these truck drivers. Well, it wasn't difficult at all, and the Maharaja permitted it. I call him that. That wasn't his title, of course. And I sat with them, and they put their arms around me and so on like that. And then I soon discovered that they were covered with fleas. And this was a difficult situation because I don't know how they ever got rid of them, but I had a hard time too. And we rode a motorcycle to get there, and I had to ride second seat on the motorcycle. And it was down this road where there were sacred cows every place, and bicycles on the road at night, all sorts of problems. I think it was amazing we ever got there and back. But that was quite an experience. There was another time that one of these ophthalmologists who would host me for an evening meal wanted to give me a hamburger. And so he went to a place that fried hamburgers, but they wrapped it up in a piece of newspaper. And it's the only time I ever got ill on any of my trips was from contaminated hamburger that I found in Pakistan one night.
Well, that's pretty fortunate in all of that travel that you never got any kind of illness.
Other countries, Thailand, where my wife visited with me in northern Thailand. If you heard about the boys in the cave a couple months ago, that's the location. Mesai is the northern part. It used to be in the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle was made up of Burma, now called Myanmar, and Thailand, and Cambodia, and Vietnam, where the drug dealing was pretty much open. Now, they still have some troubles in Thailand, but Thailand has controlled it much more than the other countries.
So at what point in all of these travels do you give yourself a root canal? Was that back at home? Because that's something that everyone always talks about, that you did a root canal on yourself.
Gosh, I don't know.
Did you do that?
I don't know. I don't think so.
No.
Monica.
Did you do dental work on yourself?
I did an extraction for myself once.
You did. And do you numb yourself before doing that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
You tend to back away from it, but you can do it if you tell yourself you got to do it. No, the root canal is foreign to me. I don't know.
You don't think you did that one?
No, I don't.
Maybe
think,
it was the extraction.
But I did a root canal for a Pakistani dentist, and I think that was a good connection, because this man had been employed to do a one-chair dental clinic at the hospital in Pakistan where I worked, and he needed help himself, and so I took care of him. And strangely enough, when it was time to leave, they were so strict about everything, they even took the batteries out of my flashlight. I couldn't travel with them, things like that. And he had connections of one Christian in the British Air Office in Pakistan. Must have shared it with Pakistani Air, I guess, at Islamabad. And he made arrangements for me to get out of the country when all others had seemed to fail. He just couldn't find a good connection, except if I went to the capital city. I don't mean the capital city. If I went to the big city down on the coast, and that was considered a pretty dangerous thing to do.
In all of your travels, did you ever have some really scary moments? Were you ever shot at? Were you ever hearing,
There was a war with Burma, or Myanmar, and Thailand. We had experienced a Buddhist holiday. We stayed in a wonderful hotel, had good food, had an elevator, had modern conveniences, the only hotel in town like that, of course, and up in the Golden Triangle area. And the Buddhist fireworks started before daylight. And so that was kind of scary, but it turned out to be a harmless thing as far as we were concerned. But about a week later, unfortunately, the host dentist in the Maasai dental clinic, his wife had given us a hand of bananas and had baked a loaf of bread for us, and we had bought peanut butter and jelly. And so this morning, we heard the same noise of fireworks, except there were straight lines of light going back and forth. And so these were tracer bullets. And the host Rotarian called me and said, "Which side of the hotel do you live on?" I said, "The south side." He said, "That's good, because they're flying from the north." And so 3 workers in a Buddhist temple were killed, just a half a block away from us. And a bomb landed in front of one of the host Rotarians, whose family he was a U.S. citizen from the Air Force there, had married a Thai girl. Her family became fasteners, and he did the casting with wonderful vacuum equipment. And so they were in the ruby business of mounting, and then they would ship them down to the capital, to Bangkok for sale. And so he packed up this stock and sent it all down to Bangkok. But we couldn't leave the hotel, and we didn't need to because we had the food. But everybody had left the hotel except 2 of us had rooms. My wife and I in one, and another unidentified person in another room. But there was no food service or anything. So there were tanks in the street, but no firing in our location. It was all from the back of us.
Did you finally get out of there?
Yeah, it cut down. They had a few It usually starts with the drug war, where there are agents in a neighboring country and there's poor boundary lines. I imagine we worked for some Myanmar patients and didn't know it, because I don't know that they know which country they're in sometimes. But anyway, we got through that just fine.
Wow, amazing. So you're doing all this world travel, and back home, two things I want to talk about. One is the cabin and the music. So your music, you're playing at this point. Are you playing for the First Presbyterian Church, the organ?
No, I was playing for Westminster Presbyterian.
I mean Westminster, right?
Yeah, we helped. We were founders of that congregation, a branch off of First Presbyterian.
So you started playing for Westminster. Do you recall around what time period?
Well, all for 70, almost for 70 years now.
Okay.
I have played for them every Sunday. I do have good substitutes, though, and enjoy being able to get away like I am now. But I played in a municipal band, too, and I played for 77 years. I've outlived anybody that ever played in a band, and it's one of maybe two municipalities that have used state money for band tax. But we don't get it anymore because we're a first-class city, and the band tax 2 mil program was started for our town when we were second-class cities. And now we've outgrown it. But our neighbors, Jackson, 8 miles to the west of us, do make use of it. And they get more money than we do because of the band tax. We get whatever the city council wants us to have.
And the municipal band issued you a great honor not too long ago, right?
Yes, they named the location where the concerts are held for me.
Was that pretty special for you?
Well, it's not complete, but it's a wonderful thing to do. But they have to terrace it, they have to build parking lots, they have to build driveways, they have to build sidewalks, and put in seats. So it will be a fine thing. Right now it's not so fancy, but it's got my name on it.
Well, I think that's pretty wonderful. The cabin, talk about the history of the cabin.
Cabin was owned by a woman whose husband was an official with the International Shoe Company of St. Louis. International purchased other shoe companies, Robert Johnson and Rand, and their symbol was a red star. Interestingly enough, we had a shoe factory in Cape Girardeau, and that section of town was known as the Red Star, and of course had nothing to do with Russia, because it just happened to be the symbol of the Robert Johnson and Rand Shoe Company. And then they purchased the famous men's shoe. I can't even think of the name of it now. So they were a conglomerate of several shoe companies, but the Leather Institute moved west with the cattle industry. All the meat packing companies that had started in the east and then moved to Chicago, moved to St. Louis, moved to Omaha, kept going west. And that's the way the shoe industry went, and foreign imports came in. And the foreign imports are so great now, they almost monopolize the whole industry.
Mm-hmm. So back to the cabin.
Back to the cabin. The owner had been with that shoe company, and he had 2 brothers-in-law who liked to be outdoorsmen. He himself was not much of an outdoorsman and passed away early. But his wife maintained the cabin that they had built 55 miles west of Cape Girardeau for her 2 brothers. And the one was a chiropractor and from St. Louis, I believe, and he had the ability to come down and make use of it. The other one was a local man. I don't know what work he did, but he drank a lot, and he was not a favorite citizen. But she maintained this cabin for many years, and then she let it stay dormant. And while it's in its dormancy, the Boy Scouts were looking for a home, and this cabin would have been good. They had one on Cotner River. Cotner means beaver in Spanish, and we'd have many beavers. But upstream from us, about 4 miles, there had been a camp sponsored by my Rotary Club called Camp Rotary. But unfortunately, the river changed channels and left it as a slough, which was not too nice for swimming. And so they were looking for a new home. And they tried different venues, and finally they tried this Mrs. Patton's cabin. She let them come down on a weekend trial, and in those days it had been common for townhomes to have benches in the hallways. If they were at a corner, they were at a corner confirmation. And if they were alongside of usually a mirror and a umbrella holder, would be out in the hallway in a straight line. And so, but in this corner seat that she had moved out to the cabin, there were little brass rings where if you wanted to see what was stored under or get out something stored, you lifted up a brass ring. That's that flush with the lid of the compartment. One of these little boys with the Boy Scout trial group had a screwdriver on his Boy Scout knife, and he dug out one of these screws, one of these brass pulls, and kept it. And it made her so angry that she would not sell to the Boy Scouts. And that's how close our cabin came to being the Boy Scout capital. They moved farther west, another 50 miles, and it's still in existence today over there. And our family came along, and my father impressed her with really wanting that cabin. And so we actually bought it for the cost of her drilling a well, a wonderful well by the cabin. And so that was the experience that we had back in about 1940 when I was still in high school. We bought this cabin and we tried to maintain it. There was no electricity at the time, and we had a 32-volt direct DC generator that burned kerosene, and it would go put, 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 like some of the one-cylinder boats on the Amazon or the Tapajós River in Brazil. And they did very well, but we had to have somebody go out and charge the batteries and run it when we couldn't go. Well, obviously, something had to be done. She finally sold it to us, and electricity, rural electrification came along, and we subscribed to it, and it was a great help.
Did you learn to fish on Cotner River? I
guess so, because I had fished in the big ditch which drains Cotner River into, it used to flow into the swamps of southeast Missouri, which gave the name Swamp-East Missouri, but now had been diverted to the Mississippi River. So we have any of the fish that are in the Mississippi River that can jump 6 feet to get up to the height of Cotner River. And you'd be surprised, without a designated fish ladder, they learn to do it. I don't know how.
What's the biggest fish you've ever caught in Cotner River?
It was a big catfish. I didn't actually hook it. I had caught on an overnight line a smaller catfish that was hooked, and the big fish came along to eat the little fish, and he got caught just by friction with the gills of the little fish expanding when he tried to take it off. And so I did get the fish off, and I did clean it, and when I was cleaning it, I could put my whole shoe in his mouth. So it was a big fish.
Wow. That is
several
a big fish.
feet long.
That is a big fish. Okay, wait, I'm gonna stop this one down and start one.